Hi, my name's Bruce Stanley. I've been coming to Greenbelt for a very long time. I used to be a circus performer, actually. That's how I first started coming to Greenbelt and doing sessions on circus performing, which may surprise you to learn that this year what I'm doing at Greenbelt is taking people foraging. More or less every morning at about 9 o'clock, if you can get up at 9 o'clock, we're taking groups of people round the site, finding where all of the edible foods are. There are some people who are obviously really keen because they come with us every day, and there was somebody that came with us every time last year, and they're back this year, and I'm trying to think of anything new to say whatsoever. But anyway, it seems to be this interesting thing. I don't know quite why it is that people are really becoming more and more interested in something like foraging. There are about 40 edible plants actually out there that we found on the racecourse, and you might know things like nettle. Anybody eaten nettle before? Yeah, some of you have. You can make really lovely pesto out of nettle. Dandelion, there's all sorts of things that you can make tea from. Silver birch leaves you can make tea from, and Scots pine, and blackberries. Come on, you must have all been blackberrying once or twice. So yeah, here we are doing this thing on foraging, and I work for an organisation called Earth Abbey, and I'm their project manager, and I'm looking after a project called Grow Zones, which is all about getting local communities of people, particularly people that have never ever grown food or veg ever before in their lives, to give it a go. So there's this Grow Zones project, and the more I started to get into the story of food and how food arrives at our plate, would it surprise you to learn, so here's an example of what I mean about the story of food, that for every unit of energy that you can get from Sainsbury's, let's imagine an egg. So if an egg represents a certain amount of calories, if you think about how many calories of work, the tractors, the delivery, the building that housed the chickens, all the rest of it, if you think about all of that energy, how much goes in to make an amount that comes out? And you might be surprised that if you take your average supermarket shop, it's 9 eggs of energy goes into producing every single egg that you get. So there's a vast amount more energy goes in to every bit of food that you get out. And I'm just kind of looking at your faces to think whether you're slightly shocked by that, whether that seems a little bit odd. Doesn't that seem a bit mad that our food system is based on so much more energy going in for something coming out? Couldn't it, you'd have thought that at least it would be a balance, one amount of energy, and what you'd really expect is that 1 unit of energy goes in and we get 10 units out. That's sort of what you'd expect. It's almost exactly the other way. And the thing that's allowing this to happen, the thing that's enabling that mismatch is oil. Most of our food system is based on oil. Oil becomes the fertilizer, it powers the vehicles, oil turns into diesel, it turns into petrol, and this can power huge, great machines and all this kind of stuff. So on the other, so I'm learning about this story. I'm also learning about foraging and the spirituality of just kind of observing myself and my wife when we're going out foraging, and you can't help but be delighted by the stuff that you're finding. You see a plant, you don't quite know what it is, and you look it up in a book, and it turns out to be something called water pepper, which is just this fantastic peppery taste, and you don't have to charge across the world to find chili. It's growing in a wood near you, this kind of chili taste. And starting to discover that there's a sort of spirituality that goes along with foraging. And I did a talk at Greenbelt this year called Foraging with the Earth God. And what seems to be interesting is that the hunter-gatherer societies, now a hunter-gatherer society is one where that equation that I've just talked to you about is completely the other way. If you're a hunter-gatherer, as we would have been in the Garden of Eden and back, 10,000 years ago backwards, we were hunter-gathering, we were putting, believe it or not, only 3 hours of energy into gathering all the food that we would have needed for a week. Whereas the earliest agricultural systems were needing at least 2 to 3 days worth. Now, let's say the hunter-gatherers over this side and the agriculturalists over this side, the hunter-gatherers are taller, they're fitter, they're living 5 years longer, they've got far more free time. The early agriculturalists would, dying younger and all these kind of things. So the big question is not, did the food gatherers have it better than the food producers, but why on earth did we ever change? And what's really exciting me is this idea that Eden, the idea that at one time back in our distant past we were all food gatherers, is actually still so strong with us that we actually live in a lifestyle nowadays where we actually still act like food gatherers. You know, you go to Sainsbury's or, you know, wherever your supermarket is, and you actually act like a forager. You go out for maybe a couple of hours a week, you fill up your baskets, you bring them home. So actually we still behave as if we were foragers. But the challenging thing is that we're doing this, and we're enabled to do this because we're living underneath the shadow of a food production system, and we're somehow completely cut off from the ramifications of what's enabling this system to go on. The fact that you know, that basically oil is enabling us to, you know, have the food system that we like. So my big question is that what goes with the agricultural system is this idea of a sky god. God is in the sky, we are the chosen people. The idea with the hunter-gatherers is that God is very much an earth god who is with us. So Christians are quite used to having the idea that God is a sky god, not so used to having the idea that God is with us on the earth. And I'm thinking, does our theology not actually help us a great deal in addressing and tackling the desperate situation that this planet's getting into in terms of its food story? So go foraging, learn about the earth god, and see, you know, whether things start to change, you know, and consider maybe Earth Abbey and the Grow Zones project. So that's me. Thank you very much.